back with another episode, and we are here joined with the OG, the original, the OC, really, the original customer, but also the OG, Santosh Sankar, host of Future Supply Chain Partner at Dynamo Ventures. Thanks for joining me, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, man.
I can't believe this is the third time you've been on.
Yeah.
Every time I introduce you to someone, or this week, weirdly, I feel like we've had these. I'm always like, man, this guy's the one that took a bet on us. So I always have to thank you every time we do one of these.
You guys are good partners to us, and what people don't probably know is you produce our podcast, but there's a lot of other things you guys work on through the course of the year, given you're part of a broader media platform.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I'd certainly encourage people to ask you questions about those offerings as well.
Appreciate that. That's weird. We've had a lot of internal conversation around that. We kind of pegged ourselves a little bit too heavy in the podcast thing, I think, and so now we're intentionally rebroadening that message a little bit. But dude, I know you've been running around like a crazy person. How was Manifest?
Manifest is awesome. So second year, I tend to judge conferences by would I come back next year based on what I experienced this year, and like without doubt, has my endorsement. And like the Dynamo team showed up this year. John flew in from the UK. He navigated everything weather threw at him. I think he had 2 canceled flights, rebooked on a less desirable carrier, but ended up there and hung out, and he had a blast. He told me, but if I recall right, I think you unfortunately fell victim to weather, so we're not able to make it out.
I did, and now I'm embarrassed. I did not know John found a way through the UK and the undesirable carriers, but yeah, we had our flight canceled, and with American, which I'm sure you know, there was very few options, and those options skyrocketed. I mean, it was going to be $2,000 more to fly. Crazy. So yeah, it just didn't work out. I'm very disappointed I missed it, but I've only heard great things from everyone who was there.
We'll get you next year.
How'd the keynote go?
It was good. It was technically a panel. So as panels go, you have to be very brief. You have to be to the point in regard or with regards to that. But by and large, I think there are good points made. I think the takeaway that the room had was, we've been in a period of, like, broadly speaking, growth since 2009, since the Great Recession, and we had a bit of a hiccup during COVID. But if anything, then things really accelerated.
Totally.
And the venture market with that has also been kind of calibrated more on growth, maybe growth at all costs, to the detriment of just good, disciplined, fundamental business building. And I think what the room likely has taken away is it's not about that anymore. It's about, like, you need to grow, but how are you thoughtful about growth? And we're probably going through a year here where, frankly, growth is not as appreciated. It's actually kind of being very thoughtful about how you build. If you're a later stage business, demonstrating a path to break even, if not profitability, is where it's at, which is a much different tune to dance to than a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So
yeah,
maybe a bit sobering, but equally felt welcome almost as well.
It seems like in the conversations I've had in this space, specifically supply chain tech, there's like a renewed energy, or almost, it's not excitement, because obviously the growth times are super exciting, but it's almost like hey, we're going to use this as an opportunity. Like, we're going to go figure this out. It's going to be a up from the ashes type story. And people seem to be embracing that.
Yeah. It's constraints, right? There's basically a new constraint that has been put on entrepreneurs, the teams that they work with. And this, you're an entrepreneur. Like, entrepreneurial people, when you put constraints on them, it actually forces them to be even more creative, and they find solutions to problems that they did not believe
Hmm.
or did not think existed. And had a founder, a very early founder that we funded, who I remember he was running low on cash, and he kind of told me, he goes, "Listen, like I've actually found out that I'm a better problem solver when my back is about to be put up against the wall. When I have all the cash in the world, when I have all the resources in the world, I tend to find that I may not be as astute in allocating it."
Yeah,
So
you have to get creative.
interesting.
I want to talk more about the environment, but before we do, how did the event go? I know you held an event there as well. Was that a good time?
Oh man, it was a
Good.
blast. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry to miss that.
It was a blast. Had a good happy hour. Because you didn't come, we weren't able to hit our minimum,
Oh no.
or at least we didn't spend to the minimum. Um, so a few of us were there, and I was trying to I was trying so hard. Like they're like 20 minutes till like you're done, and like I'm ordering everybody two or three drinks, and like insisting, take it to go, you'll be
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But no, it was a blast, and I think when you think about a conference, I think conferences are great if done right. You bring all the right people together, so it's just a very efficient draw of my
Yeah.
time. Because show up to one place and I meet, like I think on Wednesday, I had a board meeting because the entire board was basically at the
Wow.
event. And then two prior to that, I think there was like 7 meetings I had.
That's great.
So it's like hyper efficient, all before happy hour.
Yeah.
And at happy hour, I mean, it was a multiplicity
Yeah,
of
I had 18 meetings scheduled over the day and a half, and
them.
so anyway, we'll replace those. But so for people who didn't make it to the event and didn't get to be a part of all the fun things we're talking about, you all did record your talk, right? That's the besties talk that.
So there's a few different things. I think the panel that I did with Peter at Maersk, I believe Aiden at Eclipse, who I met literally on the spot, as well as the Leto brothers, should be published in the next couple of weeks. And then separate from that, all of the hosts of the happy hour, myself, Ty at Iron Spring, Julian at Schematic, Chris at Fontanalis, is live. So yeah,
Cool.
that is a nice recap for folks, and equally probably some good macro banter amongst the four of us.
Yeah, I loved the allusion to the besties. It made me laugh, and then it paid off as well. I thought so. Good
Yeah,
good conversation to tune into. So we talked a little bit about the environment that we are headed in. That some companies are already probably experiencing more than others, especially the bigger ones. What are you seeing in the space in regards to the looming recession or the slowdown, and how is that affecting the startups that you all work with?
yeah. So our strongest teams actually started containing costs about a year ago.
Okay.
So they were able to kind of look at the signals, talk to their investors, their boards, look around the corner is what I call it. And so that's a great position to be in. And some of the younger businesses, right, the pre-seed seed businesses that have only recently raised capital, it's much more difficult to ascertain what is the right path forward, because you're kind of like, I just raised $2.5 million and you're telling me not to do anything. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, what we probably have to go do is review where we were looking to make investments or accelerate burn, and what we expected that to drive in the business, and figure out, one, is that still worth doing, or is that the right objective in this kind of renewed environment? And if not, what is it that we should be calibrating towards, and what kind of burn should we
Mm-hmm.
have? And by and large, kind of the general advice we've espoused is kind of slow your burn, so lower it and slower it. And if you need to accelerate it on the back of customer
Mm-hmm.
progress, and namely revenue. And until we kind of get signs as to, hey, there's some more clarity around the macro, right now, like who's to say we may not hit a economic recession in the classic sense this year? Although that's what we thought. We saw kind of material slowdown last year, but we may not, quote unquote, get two consecutive quarters of GDP growth. But there's a hell of a lot of other challenges we need to deal with as the kind of American citizens in the American economy, and equally global citizens in a global economy. And the exception to that is there are going to be some businesses, like great businesses, will still be able to figure it out. They'll be able to raise money. But that's where you have a conversation with your board as to, hey, things are growing better than we thought. Should we accelerate and then plan to
Hmm.
fundraise? Right. That's on a case by case basis, but in general, kind of rule of thumb: lesson burn, slow it down, take it quarter by quarter.
Yeah, it's so
Right.
interesting because
More data, the better when making decisions.
it it sounds simple to say it, but it's like when you say you know measuring more so by progress or by revenue, that's like kind of just going back to business fundamentals, right? Like these startups are now having to operate more like just regular cash flow or cash flow basis companies, as opposed to what they had been doing, which was an anomaly for a decade essentially.
Yeah, yeah. Like growth is not getting the premium that it once did, or rather, let me rephrase it. Sound growth is getting the premium.
Sure.
Investors are Investors have woken up and realized they were assigning a premium to things that had nothing to show for it. There might have not been growth. Maybe you're not ready to grow. Maybe there's no customer conversation. There's no sound underlying reason as to why the business should exist or the product is built in a certain way. Those businesses were raising money, and now there's a return to, listen, we're being paid to do our homework. Go do your homework.
Yeah, absolutely. So when people start thinking about growth then in this context, and obviously with what our company does, we often get looped into some type of growth conversation. How are you advising companies to go about thinking about growth or executing uh, plans to grow when the war chest is going to be a little bit tighter? Things are going to need to be a little bit more, call it conservative, as they approach going out and either hiring or whatever it might be, whatever their growth plan entails.
Yeah. Um, so a metric that is always worth tracking, in my opinion, is dollar net revenue retention, which basically shows you period over period how much you've grown or shrunk on a dollar basis from existing or pre-existing customers.
Hmm.
And in in an environment where customers are tightening the belt, and equally you have to be more capital efficient with how you operate and grow the business, this is a really interesting indicator because it's much easier to go to an existing customer and try to upsell them something that they need and that you might be able to solve than to go to an entirely new customer, right? You've already expended a lot of the acquisition cost in getting your toe in on the land. You need to expand revenues. So um, that's what I've seen kind of more investor groups, boards focus on. Equally, that's what I tend to focus on that in general.
Sure.
As an enterprise investor, as an early stage investor, sell small, sell fast, and then quickly try to figure out how you can kind of sell an adjacency, right? But that has proven to be a great place for companies to focus on right now because you have a higher likelihood. You're a known thing. You have a higher likelihood of success. That's not to say that you don't go chase new customers, but you might be a bit more thoughtful when you go do that. Opportunity costs.
So practically speaking, what can that look like? Like you just said, sell small, sell fast. Does that mean potentially offering a new market, go to market strategy where you have a lower priced hook? Is it mean investing more in customer success? How do you see that coming to life most often?
Yeah. So generally, what happens? I'll think of one of our software businesses. They take they basically ascertain through customer discovery what their MVP is, right? What's like that the most the smallest unit of product and effort they need to expend to solve a problem that somebody's willing to pay you money for. On the back of that, you get the product in, you start to make a little money, but you're learning a ton.
Yeah.
You're learning a ton to mature that initial module out further and make it a bit more wholesome, version 2, 3, so on. But then you're also going to start learning about, okay, these are all the other things related to what I do. And perhaps a good example of this is a company we have in London called Raft. And James and Nisarg Raft have been amazing. And they actually started the business on the back of vision technology that can read bills of lading. And they can, like, it could be run over. I've seen some nasty bills of lading, coffee stains, run over, water damage, different languages. They're also not standard documents. There's not like a universal format. So all over the place. And their initial product was basically, we can extract data and allow you to dynamically input it into whatever system you need to,
Mhm.
right? And they sold contract on the back of that. And then increasingly, they start to build workflow optimizations adjacent to that, that the freight forwarder would have to deal with. Next thing you know, right, this was like 2018, I think, is when we wrote the first investment. Today, they're basically systematically going through and figuring out, how do we make the freight forwarder's life easier, right? Rather than throwing people at problems, how can they be smart, throw technology at these repetitive issues? And on the back of that, it's basically a more mature workflow product where you can buy different parts of the workflow. You can, over time, they're talking about different aspects of monetization around 3 to 4 different features. This is all separate from the fact that when they land these contracts, they might be landing an office. Like, they might land the New York office of a business, of a large freight forwarder, right? And then that business likely has offices on the West Coast and the South and the Midwest. So you go to them, you have 3 more offices of a similar size. Oh, these guys have a London office, and then they have a gal that runs the Asia office. So it can also work as much as around a feature set or capability set across regions and geos, which
Mm.
is very natural as you go to a medium to large enterprise. So that's kind of what we mean by land and expand.
Love that. I feel like that's super helpful and practical for people to be able to use. You alluded there to finding a tool or finding a solution that can automate repetitive tasks. I have to ask you, as a content guy, and because of what you do, what's your have you played with AI any? What's your take on how that's changing things for creators like us?
So our Q4 letter to our investors was definitely assisted by ChatGPT. Um, so it wasn't written entirely, because I don't know if folks have tried to write. I think that was one of our short letters. I think it was 5 pages.
Wow.
It, it it's very good at it's very good at helping you start out, but equally helping you synthesize and write something more concise.
Yes.
So almost in an editorial, it can either be in a pre-write fashion or an editorial fashion. Um, but we actually, a few of us got admitted into Notion's AI product over the last week.
Oh,
So we're
amazing.
all messing around with that,
I can't wait to get into
which
that.
is great because it's embedded into our workflow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite good. I haven't spent enough time with it, but over the last couple of days, I've written some things, hit the magic button, and it kind of just takes some of the fluff out. And when I read it, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't need any of that. It doesn't add
Mm.
anything to my copy, right? But we have a mantra here, because a seed fund is a small business, right? And so we have a mantra as to, if we're doing it more than 2 times in a year, we need to document it. And when we document it, we need to figure out, can we automate it? So a
Wow.
human never needs to worry about it, or doesn't need to worry about it as much. And if that's not entirely possible, then document it thoroughly so somebody else on the team could pick it up and actually do the task. And so we're like heavy users of Zapier. I think we implemented Zapier Q4 last year for a bunch of our comms as we kind of speak to companies and we're logging kind of progress in Notion. And we've cut out on a weekly basis as a result of that probably 30 odd emails one would send on the team.
Wow. Just with that one.
It's input somewhere and it's integrated back out and the comms are automated for everybody to consume. That's just one workflow.
Incredible.
Just one workflow. So
yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's unbelievable. I can't wait.
Definitely believe in
I just can't wait for it to
workflow.
be more part of the workflow.
It'll be a lot of fun.
I've seen a ton of hand wringing around. It's going to replace. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. And like, I think it's pure enhancement, pure, progress. And we've been using it quite a bit, just testing it. Like you used it for your investor letter. We've been using it for a lot of our own internal work. So not trying to do it client facing yet, and the work is so good. The prompts are difficult, but once you start to figure out a formula around that, I think that's what's going to be the key long term is what are the recipes, what are the formulas in order to get the type of work out. And so we're very excited about that. But Santosh, I always appreciate your time, always appreciate our discussions, appreciate you believing us from day one. And as always, it's been an honor and a pleasure getting to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate your partnership.
We'll talk soon.